We verwachten nog wat mensen. Oh, English or Dutch? Of course, I'm so sorry. How rude of me. I was wondering if that part of the room would somehow be willing to slide a little bit towards that part, because we're quite expecting, oh, that looks so beautiful. A cheek-to-cheek dance. Oh, yeah. Fabulous. That way, if people come in later, they can still have a seat. A very, very warm welcome. My name is Saskia van Stijn. I'm the director of the International Architecture Biennale of Rotterdam. This is my second edition, and it feels as if I was appointed yesterday, so I'm still full of energy. I'm here on behalf of course, the curators and the IABR team to welcome you to our opening symposium revolving around nature of hope. And we've had a lovely opening yesterday where we totally unpacked what is in fact this question of nature of hope, and if we are on the cusp of reiterating our own relationship to the planet. We only have one planet. Maybe we should reroot in the soil, really go deep into the nature and think through verticalities. In our exhibition, we have a little piece of space debris. So I think we are looking into new understandings of relations and natures. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you all here. In the second part, I will keep it very, very short, because my dear friend and somebody I admire extremely in our let's say, shared ambition and political rigor, I would nearly say, when it comes to trying to see how architecture can be a leverage for meaningful change in a time that is extremely necessary. I'm only here to welcome you. Thanks once again to all the participants, to the curators, and to our collaborative partners, the New Institute and the Rotterdam Architecture Month. Francine van Westereen is head of agency, and she will guide you through the afternoon program. Please give it up for Francine van Westereen.
Thank you, Saskia. A warm welcome also to you all from the New Institute. I'm indeed the head of agency. And in that, let's say, capacity or in that role, I was also, or not I actually, I have to say, we as agency are also responsible for the International Visitors Program that is run by Najiba Yasmin, who's sitting there, and she made a fantastic program the last 3 days for our wonderful guests today. And not today, it was the past 3 days. Emmanuel Pratt, who's sitting there, you will hear more of him soon, geolog, and our youngest, but certainly not the least active international visitor, Naima, their daughter. So thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to spend time with you. And I think spending time is one of the most, I think, important ingredients of an ecology, and also of collaboration. I think sometimes we think it is really easy to collaborate, or we say that it is, oh, then we do it in collaboration. But actually collaborating takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of people often as well, a lot of afstemming and overleg. Not always that nice. I see people smiling, I hear people laughing. I think that is really the case. But I think if you really want it, if you can trust each other, if you value each other's knowledge, if you value each other's networks, if you really think that actually the two, or in this particular case, 3 organizations together can really make something which is more than if only one of us had organized it, I think you can really make something of a program. And I think the same goes for the International Visitors Program, which is I would say, a rather small and modest instrument that we have within our international commission that we have as agency, for which we can invite international guests from all over the world to visit the Netherlands, to visit Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Utrecht, Den Bosch, Eindhoven, Groningen, you name it. We bring them there where we think their knowledge, I think their knowledge and expertise can be of help, can be of inspiration, and vice versa. I think this is really important, that we really make an exchange and really make an effort to build those exchanges and try to make those exchanges last longer than only the period that the guest is here. I think the same goes with Emmanuel Pratt. You already said it, let's do it. You already started the job, you already started all the exchanges. We went to Rotterdam on Friday, we visited Amsterdam yesterday together with Nadia Owaki, who I will introduce in a moment. Amsterdam Zuidoost, and here the west of Rotterdam, we visited different communities. Communities and people, designers, inhabitants of the citizens of the Rotterdam West, who are all working, let's say, on their specific places to make more of the city than it, to make more of the city than it was or is. Sometimes with nature, or often with nature, but most of the times with people. And I think that's actually the second thing of an ecology. Ecology also needs people. You can think of ecologies as ecologies of people, which is also a hopeful thing. I think also if we sit here together as a community, that gives us all hope. At least it gives me hope. Emmanuel Pratt is the founder and co-director of the Sweetwater Foundation, which is based in Chicago. Yeah, you work in a sort of, I would say, cross-sections of architecture, urbanism. You work with, let's say, policy while not being a politician yourself. Doing all those things, agriculture, food production. I think, you have an amazing knowledge to share, and I think also an amazing practice to share. And what I really admired and really appreciated, the fact that you generously shared your knowledge already during all the visits and the talks that we had in the coming weeks, and already invited almost everyone that we met actually to come to Chicago, which is something that will happen, not with all of them probably, but at least with some of them. It is part of an exchange program that, together with Nadia Owaki, an urban strategist and economist, I'm setting up a program in response to a question of the embassy the consulate in New York. to become part of a program that's, let's say, gives attention to the 400-year relationship between the Netherlands and New York and the States in general. We are setting up an exchange program with the Bronx White Plan and now also the Sweetwater Foundation with communities coming from the Netherlands and the communities based there. This is something that will happen in the spring next year. We will visit it in September. But that's all to come. Today we are here for the talk of Emmanuel, and afterwards he will go into conversation with Nadia Owaki, whom I also know already for a few years, and we are in this ongoing conversation actually on the topics that Emmanuel also will talk about, how we can change actually the way that we, let's say, do and work and live and design cities. And I think that's also what we share, that I think Saskia also referred to it, the belief that it's possible to do it differently. And I think that is something that will hopefully also run, and I think it will also run through this day. I think without further ado, let's give it up for Emmanuel, please.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here. It's fascinating when you think about like Chicago, Rotterdam, Amsterdam. Why? What do we have in common? Well, we like to say we live in the future. You got it? Oh, it's picking up an old feed. That's the old feed. There we go. Checking. You want me to just reconnect? It's the old, just reconnect it? All right, I got you. There you go, that's it. I already started, but I rewind again because we live in the future. See, all right. It's appropriate today to think about why are we here? This is not like a passive moment, this is an urgent moment. And then the reality of the urgent crisis in front of us is that people are dying because of the conscious decisions of our systems to do the same old same. So premise of this is we live in the future, because that's the only way to be hopeful. But in order to be hopeful, sometimes it is actually depressing to be so hopeful and not see the results of the hope. So it's a fine balance to keep your humanity and sanity. So first we always look to nature. Why is it the universal? It's axiomatic, we look to nature. First, you have to define it. What is nature? Well, is it the disposition in temperament? Is it the essence? Is it the universality of the controlling forces of all beings? What is it? It's all. With hope, you know, it's an active process. It is a description. It is to be hopeful. It's usually a description of a person, of a type of mentality. So it's both people and nature combining, you know. So the question of like publics is where I think we should dive into. Public is in the intersectionality of people and place and space, and where we tend to look for hope. When we try to go into a public space, we're looking for signs of hope. And so for us, I define people as, again, public can be a general public, a populace. It can be a space, but also that space with the right combination becomes a place when it is hopeful. Challenge is humans make things really ugly and messy and, you know, like try and put things in a boxes that the interconnectivity of the multiplicity of publics don't always agree. How do we define these things? How do we reify them things? And how do we control or let go of those things? So we tend to be overly controlling. The biennales or biennials are great opportunities to interrogate these thoughts and unpack them. And it's a great opportunity to be here for this Nature of Hope is a key theme. And it's also putting it in perspective of all the other previous biennials. Because you have the opportunity to do research, you have the opportunity to do public programming, but the problem is it's the question of value. What do you really value? Because if it's ephemeral, if it's just this temporal fleeting thing, then so what? And most of the times biennials and biennales tend to be so what? They don't reach the actual general public. You start a key conversation and it doesn't continue. It does not last over time. It's not sustainable. So you don't have a question. You have to really interrogate what is the value in the built environment over time, and really shift power structures and dynamics and money and capital flows. It's a chance to interrogate a priori and a post posteriori research frameworks. What does this mean? Is it deductive or inductive reasoning? Is it from your experience? From what experience? Whose lived experience? And was also like, how did you derive what you think you know? Who is the expert? It was a previous panel was talking about who's the expert. This really is about our cognition. See, touch, taste, hear, and smell. How are we constructing new ways of being and thinking in order to new ways of doing? Not just in the academic sphere. That's a problem. Not in just in the built environment world. That's a problem. The professional practitioners are the problem. I like the frame from Jeremy. Like, think about how architecture is climate crisis. So, episteme. Interrogating this basis of knowledge through epistemology, trying to actually look at the limitations of what you think you know and how you think you know, and the data. What does the data say? Well, who made the data? Who's not in the data? This is the lecture part, so, you know. Data, what is it? Who collects it? Why is it on the map? Who's not on the map? Why are they constantly, why is there certain holes and vacuums in our memory, blind spots, that we all say the same thing over and over and over again? Education, housing, you know, like public space, green space. What does that mean? But you have to interrogate and iterate upon the data. You have to actually do the data and then question it constantly to get information. And then after a period of time, you get towards a pathway of knowledge, but you cannot think that you know it. Because it's over a generation you get wisdom. That's why we have to look to elders for, you know, and ancestral, like indigenous ways of knowing. So when you catch a catchphrase like living room and food hubs and you start to make renderings and then the renderings look like that, and then it's photoshopped and the people aren't from the place, but then you have another rendering like that that says, oh, it's a transit hub. Wait, is that a transit hub? Is that a food hub? I don't see food production. I see people moving around. It's very, the simulacra, the false notion, hyper realism of the thing is limited and unbounded rationality. It's just the gimmick that gets you the capital, to get you the development, to then start more problems. Where's the glass from? How do you produce the glass? How is it delivered? Who does the labor? All of the other things that matter the most. The cognitive capacity and the limits of that, and the limits of information and time constraints, architects, you have to build within a timeline, within an ROI, return on investment. And then you just have to satisfy. Too complicated, let's just make the most of it as we can and move on. When you have things like greening infrastructure, greening New York City, and you get images like this, I mean, yes, it's a provocation, but come on. So, tree houses, you know, biophilic architecture, you start to interrogate these terms and it's like, what are we producing? How is it being produced? Who's doing this work? What, is this gonna live? Like, is this gonna happen? Scale, the dragonfly, there's a reason why the building never manifests. And we have to be honest about, as we scale up and out, we're scaling away from place and space and people. And when you're looking at future developments, this is crisis. Like, we're looking at these insular developments that are interrogating imagination without a real place. And they're trying to force the hand and make this is underway, and there's lots of debate about this. This exists, well, it doesn't because no one lives there. But when you have an obsession with Disney World and castles, and then you design places like this, and you penalize the planet and all the people who built this, because no one is there. So it's time for a paradigm shift. So I'm here to talk about Sweetwater Foundation. Our tagline is, "There grows the neighborhood." We operate around KORD, a balance of chaos and order. And then we'll take you through a timeline that says, how do we get here? It's not a master plan, it was visions and ideas and shares and collaborations. 2014 was asked to get to a site that looked like this. It was like a couple years, these pictures are a couple of years prior, but it was a 2-acre site, a hole in the south side of Chicago that has lost its plans for development. No one wanted to be there. But then when you look at the plans and you look at like city planning, the zoning said zoning for commercial, zone for manufacturing, this legacy of the past, and the information didn't add up. Housing was not there. So I had to look deeper, and our team looked deeper, and we're like, wait, we found the footprint of that building, that 5,700 footprint. That was Mosley School for Bad Boys. That was one of the worst, the first school for social adjustment for orphans and incorrigibles in Chicago, one of the worst schools. And it became a homeless shelter and demolished. The surrounding housing was in various stages of disrepair because of neglect. It was like, why is it so neglected? And then when you put this into the scale of the south and west side of Chicago, you think about these terms like blight. Blight is a term in the US particularly that says, oh, it's urban blight. It's a problem, it's a decay of an area, decay of a community. That's a problem because it says it's a frustration of plan or hope for development. But it's actually it's a term from agriculture. It's the death and decay of a crop so that it no longer sustains life. So you're translating that to communities, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's embedded in your consciousness. But it wasn't always like this. That same community, when you dig through history, you look at the density, you look at the housing, look at what was there. There was communities there. They were erased. So, by 1895, it was a mixed population, Irish, Italian, not much black. By 1926, Great Depression, Great Migration leading is some black population. And then there was fear. The underwriting manual and the racial restrictive covenants in America said that in order to sustain your property values, any change of racial occupancy will lead to instability and a reduction of values, period. If black folks live there, don't invest. This is the underwriting manual in 1936. So, of course, by 1940, it says the colors have monopolized the place. So, of course, the redlining property then says, redline it, and then you have only select audiences that live there, emergency housing for coloreds coming back from black population, coming back from World War II. And then that's where you live. Then you put the bad boy school there, and you tear that down. And then you don't insure the neighborhood. And then the fires happen, and what happens? It's erased. That is the place that we started our research to say, well, that's our beginning. First, you have to do that type of research before you start any form of project. And so we say they tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. And this is the space, the farm was born. So from that space, we found our place to find a rhythm with nature with the tomatoes, the varieties, the peppers, the colors, the seasons, the flavors, the potatoes, structures that you have to design for cucumbers because they grow 6 feet plus. And then having this rhythm with our beans but then beautiful nature comes up. Butterflies, moths, all the insects, hummingbirds arriving in a place that had no life, supposedly. Our praying mantis, our crickets, that's Naima having a private conversation with the praying mantis. The sunflowers, who can see the bee? When you look, you can see. So when we started to see the bees, we started to see also the peaches that we were cultivating, the strawberries, the blackberries, those that grow no. So we translated to the next space. The house across the street, I had to do some research. Wait, why is that? Why is that featured in a real estate? Live like a land baron, how evil. If you dare, it says it. So he said, cool, we dare. Watch what happens. It's magic. Art installation, bring the people. People find the place. We're coming in nature. We're sharing the fruits of our labor, which is through cooking and culture. Finding and crossing barriers. Finding art is the source, the supreme artist. Nature is the supreme artist. So we find our humility and make field trips. Same place that was like, if you dare. Yeah, of course, field trips, and you leave with a bag of greens. By 2015, we were asked to be in a biennial, Chicago Architecture Biennial. It's fascinating, going from this place of nothing to a farm into now the biennial. So then the theme was the art of architecture. How appropriate. We weren't featured. We were just like a supplement in the Art Institute and the other places. So we did an installation at Outside Design, you know. We created a classroom because we were doing classroom installations. 20 by 20 space, verticalized, aquaponic, hydroponics. But then the people showed up for workshops in that space that they were never really welcomed before, and then magic happens. So we started talking in real time about architecture and equality. Why are these kids never invited into this space? What's the history? Down the street, we did another installation at Columbia College, recreating a living room, questioning the ecology of absence, a living room space, a dining room space. All of this is wood. Simple, but it was from pallets that were discarded by the same institution. The galleries, the art galleries, wood, AKA trees, being disposed of by our culture. So we picked them up, we did the installation. So then we started to look at, we got asked the same year to be featured for policy for looking at building healthy food, land use plans, et cetera, for the American Public Health Association. You would think this would mean something, right? No. So 2016, crisis year, turmoil politically. G and I were like, we can't stand this. We have to do something. So the manifesto was born, We the Publics. We stand for life. Those that don't stand for life, we stand opposed to you. Look at the inequities of all these multiplicities of publics, and we demand that we're here for life. Which side are you on? That's our value. It's a call to action. We were identified by Art Place America that year for a pinnacle, like a example of creative placemaking. We challenged them, saying the placemaking is colonial. How about regenerative placekeeping? They said, sure, fund it. Here you go, try it. It's an important initiative we'll talk about later, but Art Place America said, here you go. Here's an opportunity to design whatever you think needs to be happening. Great, so we figured out how to design 3 typologies of greenhouses. This is one example. The Smart Pod, which is basically a shipping container with a greenhouse on top with the manifesto on the side. Solar panels in the front. Right next to the garden and the Think Do House, we started to design, iterate, heuristics, trial and error, learn it by doing. How the hell do you make this work? Once you design it, how do you really understand a greenhouse? You have to understand the temperature, the flows. You have to understand like seasons and seasonality. You have to really understand energy through the plant's perspectives. So if you have arugula, lettuce, collards, chard, and you're starting by seed, the numbers are so vast. Well, you can start really small with like hundreds of thousands if you wanted to, but like you're running out of space very soon. So you have to design to your limitations. So, but the best part is that when cocoa shows up in question, you're like, what you growing? Can I get some? It has to be shared. It has to be reciprocal. So another typology is greenhouse. It's a workshop. Work, shop, get it? So we interrogated wood in a greenhouse. We had to design, make it habitable, make it functional, but also make it a classroom for teaching woodworking. community woodshop. How do you do this in a 20 by 36 foot space? Well, you do it very creatively. You figure out how to work within the space throughout all the seasons. You bring in a table saw, you start designing the modular furniture, and then the place is born. Reclaimed wood with people doing education, pedagogy around the Think Do House, you know, and the receipts, the addresses of where the wood was coming from. Pay attention to that later. Development projects. So these pallets and crates being tossed and discarded, you know, throwing away trees, we then design our K-order rack, the balance of chaos and order. How do we figure out 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot? How do we clean this wood to get our constant supply of wood so we don't have to go buy wood all the time? How do we design the coat racks? How do we design the shelving? How do we design through winter in Chicago? Year round. And then the art and imagination, and then the puppet shows. We didn't expect that, but a puppeteer was like, hey, I'd love to do a reclaimed wood puppet. Look at the kids, they're in a different world. So our wood shop became a puppet space. By 2017, the space had absolutely become a place. We designed the benches to welcome people to show up as an extension of the garden, as an extension of the house, an extension of the place. Get the greens, no fence. People are like, you're crazy. Yes, we are. That good crazy. So when the kids come in and say, that's not a bench, that's my playground, then you're right. That's your playground. Coco brings her family, grandkids, so they can have a holistic life experience. Also, she can run them tired, right? So across Washington Park, which had been a park that had been set up to be an island of separation of classes and races. University of Chicago on one side, everybody else on the other. We were asked to do an installation, and we did the radical reconstruction of values. Public art, looking at our aesthetic, looking at our, you know, we did a 14-foot, we did a 14-foot by 40-something hand drawing with wood, reclaimed wood, and it welcomed the people to come in and play. You don't do that in our gallery. But we did, and it was family days. What was beautiful is we took the wood from our workshop, the scraps, the cutoffs, and gave it to them to play. What did the kids come up with? Architecture. They know, just give them a chance. And then this family shows up and is like, my kid is so interested in architecture, never thought about art as a profession. Where do I go now? Well, you can check in with us, you can check in with these schools. If you want, I went to architecture school, we can come on over. So then we were asked to be not featured again in a biennial, but not featured, but make new history. So we said, well, we're gonna make new history. The first timber frame barn in the city of Chicago since the fire. How about that? On the farm. So we designed the first timber frame barn on the farm, across the street. How do you design a barn in Chicago that has a legacy of not wanting anything to do with a barn? So we had to iterate and iterate and iterate, do the architectural thing, do the models, do the exploded axons, and then build it. We work with international woodworking groups. We hand raised it, Douglas fir, celebrated it. We had the pavilion structure up. And then by 2018, the following year, it was time to bring in the people. And when the people come, they show up. And then they bring their culture. So you have music, you have dance, you have stilt barn dance. They usually think of a cowboy barn dance. We had a West African stilt walking barn dance, because that's our culture. Place for imagination, art, food, sharing, exchange, yoga, peace, meditation, hope. By 2019, this time we actually got featured in the biennial, finally. So other such stories, we said, let's talk about housing and equity and talk about work and education. Let's talk about that. Take that vacant lot that had that preconceived notions, and we'll design an R&D house. R&D play on research and development, for us, regenerative neighborhood development. Play on all of it. So we said, let's build a modular structure, timber frame right there, again, right across the street, that looks and feels like the same type of structure we did before, right? It's cousins to the barn, similar. These are installations, but this is not for the biennial. This is for us. This is for our neighborhood. This is for our peoples. It's part of it, for sure, but this is us. So when we built this thing and we learned the lessons from the polycarbonate and we learned the lessons from the sunflowers and how to frame the space and the beauty and poetics of space, poesis, the coming of being, of place. When we had to move it to the cultural center, people were pissed. They were like, where's our structure? So we had to iterate again and make the meeting house. Redesign based on the relationships for the community for our accountability. So we said, cool, reclaimed wood, more accessible, in the same place. Iterate, 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 recreate, boom. So another pavilion was born. It's the place to meet, gather, share, reflect, incorporate the polycarbonate, public greenhouse, public cooking demonstration, public market. And so we had to study the same kind of like, what's the temperature difference, what's the humidity differences, what's all of this, and translate it back to the barn so that the barn can become that type of celebratory space as well. So we started having food spaces, farm-to-table events, planning. Tatiana Bilbao, international architect, is in the scene, sharing with the people of the neighborhood. And the puppet show came back. Cultural. Like Juneteenth celebrations, our first celebration of freedom, where you just dance and you're just there. Reflections, we had folks from indigenous groups that had been erased, Potawatomis, from that same site. We had them do prayers, meditation and prayers. And the building lived within symbiosis with the land. Having a space like that we understand across the seasons, and iterate and iterate and iterate so we can exhaust our heuristics to really understand how to make it matter to our hoop houses. Because we had to figure out next steps, how the hell do you grow in Chicago year round? So right next to that, we had to design hoop houses, high tunnels. We designed it, bend it, fabricated it, enclosed it. Lessons learned from others, but also, and then water structures, butterfly roof water structures, collection systems. In Chicago in the winter, I'm not playing. Like snow loads, but to be in that space and it's hopeful with food is like no other. So then you have Mama Afua that shows up in February because she was like, I just wanted to be around the plants. I wanted to be in the warmth. I wanted to touch the collards and the kale and the turnips because I can't get none anywhere else. So we had to reevaluate, well, what do they say we can and can't do? When can you and you can't grow this? So we had to make our own cue cards and information because the USDA said that we can't grow in this zone in this time. So we had to become authors and our own experts of, yes, you can. We obviously do it. Sunsets in February, where it was warmer because of the kiss of the sun and thermodynamics. It was warmer in that space than it was in Miami in February. That's a space of radical imagination. So we understand, how do we control the airflows? How do we control the temperatures? How do we control this seasonality over time, over the entire year? By 2020, we started to look at the additional places of abandoned. Houses across the street, another one, reconstruction house. Yeah, it's add the solar panels, add the picture frame windows, cool, but this is a place of memories. We found all the memories of the family that was in there. Otherwise, it would be in a vacant lot. So we turned it into a restoring space, like a StoryCorps space. It's an art space for the neighborhood. Local art gallery for story sharing with elders. A place to stay, a place to rest, and then also during COVID, mind you, a place for remote presentations. Cooking demonstrations to stay connected to people across networks. So, we had all of these live cooking demos, and we archived them. We have memory sessions from folks that are like 86 to 96 years old that have memories of the place. By 2021, it's time to take on another space. Why not, right? Because the spaces of capitalism decided that this was now invaluable. No, not valuable. We said it's invaluable. So we had a church that, you can see it was a house, became a church, and then secured land around it, and then it lost its population. So it was abandoned. That building is surrounded by 2 acres of land. So we had to study the materials, study the bricks, study the structures, and dream of the possibility of civic art church. What's civic? What is art? What is a church? So we had to dream, do the architectural thing, and then we had to get to work in January, putting on a new roof in Chicago. Worked with some trade union license, of course, all the permitting and stuff. But the place was born, and by 2022, the following year, we had to welcome the people. It's time. You see how we opened the slide door? That building can only live as long as the door is open in and out, inside and outside. That's the main thing. You have live performances. And we got finally featured, first time, kind of 250 words, in the New York Times. Can it build values? Yes, we can. 2023, we got asked by Leslie to be featured in Biennale. So last year, we were like, great, what are we gonna do? And I told her, I said, it's only be worth my time if my team goes, and if we do the work and we do the installation and it lives there. It's the only way I'm gonna do it. So she said, okay. So we said, we are the laboratory of the future. And we built the wood based on the meeting house, based on our market. We iterated on the design, opened it up. First, we had to go to Detroit. We used the resources and flows to support our partners, our values-based partners in Detroit, because that matters the most. I don't care about a biennial until the people get supported and served. So we did the iterations, and we did the first installation in the Civic Art Church, scaled it up. That's massive scale up. Then I had to break it down and then ship it in, put into a shipping container, and then ship it from the south side of Chicago. We had fun packing this thing. And then it had to end up in Venice. So it landed in a space that people, when they looked at it, they were like, that's Washington Park in Chicago. It looks the same. That could be anywhere. But the point is, it's everywhere. That's hope. So we were hopeful that it got there. It got there, we installed it. 2 of my team members have never had a passport. We got them passports. We traveled around the world. We built it together. We faced off with Italian carpenters. That was fun. I mean, Italian male carpenters looking at 2 black women that are doing carpentry is something else. They walked off the site. But we built it. And then the mayor showed up. And then we said, hey, let's play an imaginary game of chess. Checkmate in 3. This is yours. He said, well, how much? I said, it's gonna be a gift to you. Just wait. So we rushed, that you can take a picture of the mayor. Oh, that's for good. So we said, we gotta rush home to get to our Juneteenth celebration because the Civic Arts Church is waiting and our team is waiting. So we had a block party in that same space because it was alive at this point. No idea what was gonna happen, just, that's Naima running, leading the charge in the game of tag. Live performances, music, we the publics. So our everyday at the Commonwealth is not about this political nonsense. It's about actual commonwealth. It is looking at nature and place and space and people and interrogating the questions and policies through a biodynamic campus, our communiversity campus, that stretches, rooted in a residential neighborhood on the south side of Chicago over 10 years. That is a new place of hope. So this is like a market. This is Juneteenth. This is every day. Field trips every day. Whenever a kid comes in and they see the kids, they see the plants inside, can I grow this? Yes, you can, in your classroom. Can I take this? Yes, you can. Can you grow it? Yes. Can I eat it? Yes. Serving on Wellness Wednesdays in an alleyway, representing our culture, collard greens and black eyed peas and Hoppin' John and all of that goodness. But in a twist, like I want some other cultures in here. Naima did the cake on the left for her birthday, and then so somebody had a competition saying, I want the hibiscus version of it for my birthday, and it's like healthy competitions. Naima won though. Blackberries, strawberries, little things like most people don't realize that the seeds are on the outside of a strawberry. Why? Because we have plant blindness. So it's time to wake up and then reclaim these spaces in a farm, with the seasons, with the abundance, with the markets and the marketplace. That's our regular norm. People can't unsee this now. So when the homeschool or the field trips have art and then nature weaving, and it reminds us of our responsibility to our food and our soil and to our growing and our practice and our food systems and our structures. And when it's cold, we're like, great, we get to like slow time down and learn how to use a chisel made by the mallet. I mean, we made the mallet, made the tools, transfer of knowledge, to knowledge. That's actually, his name is Knowledge. So that we can like bring new life to the gallery. You get it? It's this interconnectedness of place. And so when the field trip comes and that image happens and you question, why is there a vault on that church and why is it open? It's like, because the value is inside. That's the value. That's our hope. We're looking forward to this time over time over time over time. The postcards now become thank you cards to our elders. And then we look at the bees as a source of inspiration for not just the cards, but also to do art projects and mural projects and then painting projects. And then the birds, and we listen to the bird calls, and then it's sources of like, I want to design a play space, a swing space, not just for the kids, but for the adults too. Because that's the childhood and hope. It's just hope. It's interconnected. So when the place becomes a postcard and then the postcard becomes an elders walking in wisdom fashion show, it's a place, the community university is a place for the people, but it's in nature. So then the article comes out in the Wall Street Journal about there's too many damn vacant lots. What's your perspective? What's your worldview? Is that a problem or is it an opportunity? Not an opportunity for an economic opportunity, but what about if we restory? So in 2011, this is right across the street from the farm. This weird anomaly of space that was like not really, it was the zoning meets manufacturing meets, but 2011, it was flat land. 2011, by 2018, it was wood chips, it was trees, it was like, nature had done its thing. So by 2022, we blocked a series of developers and then privately acquired the property. And we said it's time for the story of the prairie to be born. So it's not an actual prairie, because prairies are super vast, but the millennial time scale of a prairie. Gia and Naima both gave a great presentation they'll share about like, how do you change your mindset to you have your responsibility of now to act in a time scale of 1,000 years, like a prairie. So a micro prairie. So we put up a prairie fence. The team got to work. We actually had to cultivate the land, till the land, explore what was going on, what's good, what's not. And then, we brought in the compost that was not fully finished, because prairie doesn't want fully finished, like rich moisture. They want different type of soil. Looked at the library of what to plant as a homeschool assignment. I'll call on Naima later to ask about how many seeds she planted this year. But then we had to carve the landscape for the pathway, minimal footprint just to have it. And then this thing started to come to life. And we had to watch the bunnies and watch we have coyotes. Once the poppy started to hit, we were like, yeah. Stuff from previous years hitting right now. So we started looking at iNaturalist, AI. You're actually looking at something that could be beneficial, where you can record your observations, document it, create an archive, listen to the bird calls, create an archive. So in January and February, when the snow drops, and then the daffodils, and then the tulips, and then these are starting to show up and emerge, and they're signs of hope, of things that are working, and the life is just continuing in the spaces that we've been cultivating. And I'm just flipping through this so you could admire the beauty in nature. But it's a pleasant reminder of that's why our work is so important, because nature will always be there, and it'll be there beyond us, but we have to do our part. It's a pleasant reminder of the beauties in nature. So by the time we hit the summer and the sunflowers wake up and say, hello, hi, how are you? And then we start to look closer and look at the butterflies and archive all of the ranges of different moths and species and all the sources of art, the inspirations of art. We really know our place. And there's signs and indications of the time and the seasons and what's working and what's not and all that. And we know how to adjust and pivot. And when we really respect the fact that like 600 native bees, there's like I don't know how many like ranges of bees. But when Naima planted the lamb's ears? Yeah, the lamb's ears. And then that bee showed up, because that's the bee that shows up to lamb's ears. That's what it's looking for. Then our guy that does the honey, that's restoring his life because he's like, I just love honey, I love bees. So we created a space for the marketplace, to then harvest the amaranth and harvest the flowers to make bouquets and not pay $25 a bouquet that's gonna die in a week. We have this remapping of our publics that is on our website. We are actually exhaustively challenging policy. So this is available on our website. But this is the barn now. It's part of our community. It's part of our lessons and remote lesson plans. So we remap the publics. Each one of these, if you click on the tab, you can get the PDF of each thing as look at it for syllabus and research opportunities. But I'll show you this because we actually started to look at what if Chicago's budget is 25.2, any city budget, not just Chicago, $25.2 billion annual. If the Parks District's operational budget is 500 something million, then half of 1% is 2.5 million annual. Then what are we doing with our budgets? How are we, and we looked at the policies over generational perspectives. So this is the space for our research to hold ourselves and everybody else accountable because we'd like to remap. How did we get here from the plan of Chicago and the plan of 1909 to present? We should understand that was a commercial club commission for certain objectives. When you have policies say green, healthy neighborhoods, and you say that we don't exist, then we have to say, well, what if? What if actual planning and architecture incorporated this kind of mindfulness and ecological awareness? What if we were part of the public health department? What if we were part of, I would say that we're all of this. Education, recreation, health. And so our community places and spaces are all spaces of research that have a common value system. Regeneration, small is beautiful, K-Ord, balance of chaos and order, Sankofa. Reach back to be present, to move forward. Do not ignore the history, because you will just keep perpetuating the same problems. Seventh generation, we've inherited our planet from, and our responsibility is 7 generations ahead. I think every culture has always said that. And then we're trying to be as open source as possible so that they don't try to, shut us down. We have an epistemology of human development. There's books that we use all the time, and we also author new pieces, and we share them all the time. We are known as the Black Mountain College, current version. You should look that up and understand who came out of that. More important, this is the sales pitch if you haven't figured it out. We have talks, we have collaborations, we have studios, now we have exchanges, we have immersions, and we welcome all of these partnerships, as many as possible, because we are so excited when we find solutionaries, people that are surrounded with problems that find the solution. That's what we want to do. So we have a year-round engagement it's year-round. And it causes a space of interrogation of people, place, space, and hope across the multiplicities of publics, because it is only through a proximity to the ecology of place, its land, people, and flows across the seasons that one can truly acquire the tacit knowledge, not just book knowledge, not just I built it one time thing. I've done it time and time again. It's in my body. It's in body knowledge. It's in my muscle memory. It's in my reflexes. I can see by the way you walk. I know that's John. Nope, it's 3 o'clock. That must be Sam. You just know. It's just a way of knowing. So tacit knowledge requiring to design interventions capable of sustained impact and real transformation. There grows a neighborhood. That's it.
Sorry about this. A little misunderstanding. I'd like to introduce again Nadia Awaki, an urban strategist and economist working in Amsterdam. She's currently working on the community wealth building at the Masterplan Zuidoost in Amsterdam as well. As said, we are in a continuous conversation about urban planning, how to do things differently. I think the presentation that Emmanuel just gave, I think resonates a lot. I know, especially with you, but also with me, and I think comes back a lot of our conversations. You will be interviewing or have a conversation with Emmanuel and with some people who are sitting here on the first row. Jan Jongerts, Anien Stornebrink, Catharine Visser, and Zico Lopez, I think. But let's see how it goes. And actually, all of you are involved in,
Let's see.
in the conversation. Let's see, yes.
Am I in?
Yeah, I think so.
Check, check. Okay, great.
Check. Yes. Thank you for your talk. Maybe just to start the conversation, we're sitting here during the architectural month with a lot of architects, designers. How do you see your role as a designer, as an architect?
As a facilitator of active disruption. We have to unlearn.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, we're stuck in the ways that we do things, and sometimes people say, oh, this is really not the right thing to do. Then stop doing it. Somebody else is doing it better, so give them the money. The community can really do this better, so find the resources. That's your role. And support the relationship. Because a lot of times, I was telling somebody earlier, like, this is not a project, this is our lives. It's a big difference. The temporality and the ephemeral nature of a lot of times of architectural projects or a research project is like, oh, I did the thing, there it is, and I'm now researching and I'm presenting on behalf of the people. Like, nah, that's part of it. Get the awareness out, but actually have them there. Support the project beyond the project mentality, because it's someone's livelihood. And if you support it over a generation, then the seeds of that future will guide us to where we need to be properly.
So in that sense, you're not only designing the built environment, but you're actually designing the whole framework in which things are taking place.
I mean, it's a shift in worldview. I mean, it's what it takes is like actually believing in a shift in the worldview, not just having a small convening. It's like, what's our responsibility and accountability? So to come a year later and say, this is what I did to support, as inspired by the nature of hope as a biennial. So yeah, we should agitate. People say like, oh, I'm a change agent. So what are you changing? What have you cataloged? How are you an alchemist? Tell me. Show me. Actually, don't tell me, show me. Who else have you reached?
So you have been active for 10 years in this project.
Yeah, not a project.
No, not a project, I'm sorry.
Our lives.
And regenerating this neighborhood.
And collectively. That's another thing. Is like, the telltale, the challenge of architects is usually the ego. But a lot of grandmothers say ego is easing God out. I mean, right? You're laughing. Like, you resonate with that. But yeah, no, so like it's the collective and it's a curatorial process. So yeah, it's like.
So could you tell a bit more? So it's a project of the collective. You're trying to...
Project.
What kind of word?
I'm
sorry, I have to rephrase my language.
Yes.
Could you give some examples how during the last 10 years people started to take agency within the collective?
Sure. I mean, so one thing that is good for architects and planners to do is we do know site. We know site analysis, we know building, we know you have access to what the permits are supposed to be, what the government is supposed to do and support. That's great.
one of the things that we have been actively doing is making that very clear and plain to people of the residents of the neighborhood, and so that the kids are growing up with it as well. So then there's this really symbiotic sharing of information of saying, hey, I know this is about to happen at this house. I know this is going to happen over here. Hey, so-and-so's porch might be in violation of this. And if they lose this, they might lose the house. So we have success stories where we have team members, residents, we have people moving in from our collection. We keep people in the houses, and we also have people that we have brought to our community to be in the community. Now they know their neighbors, who then look out for each other, then look after the spaces. That's a neighborhood. That's what we've been like designing out of our society. Because it's ephemeral nature of like, I got mine, I gotta travel, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. We're not rooted in our place enough. And so we don't really, I can't ask my neighbor for sugar because they're never there. I don't know who they are. So the success story is that it was like, when you come up and say, hey, Mama Zora, like what you need for greens Friday? She's like, you got my bags, right? You got my bags of collards and kale and whatever. She's coming to Friday knowing that Friday is a market, and we make sure that the team, everybody knows, make sure to look out for her. And then she comes back and says, here's a meal I prepared for you. Simple, small acts of humanity that like we have thousands of evidence of that as success stories. All successes. But according to the city, none of that is reflected. That's not a metric that counts. The only thing that counts is like a pounds per square inch or pounds per acre or whatever, that you grow. It's not the hugs, it's not the handshakes, it's not the interactions, it's not the innovation. So we've had people that have moved to. We have people that come to just sit and be. We have people that say, hey, don't do that right here. We have, even better, we have, I don't know how many thousands of people that have said, I'm now going to grow my own garden. Because in our markets, when we come from market, we're like, here's some seedlings. Anybody grow here? Anybody have all right, so yeah, when tomatoes go in the ground and then, or sunflowers and calendulas and amaranth, whew, they are super regenerative. You can't get rid of them fast enough, So we were just like, that's a market opportunity, not to just be like, I'm gonna charge $5 per tomato. Like, no, I'm gonna give it to you.
Of these developments that you put something into motion, and then you start seeing these are developments that are becoming self-sustaining. People are taking them, and it's growing their own, their own way.
So going back to it, when Knowledge, who was on, in one of the slides, Knowledge says, my mom sent me here on assignment, so because we have our own garden. Here's a success story. Where's Knowledge now? He's built his garden. He's now not a full-time employee with us. We offered support for him to be a full-time for the summer to figure if that's gonna work for him. He's got his fiance that he met through our program, which is funny. And they are now cultivating their space with our support and defense. I mean, literally. In a separate area, in a separate neighborhood. That's success. We are penalized for our successes because we don't have the same metrics and numbers of jobs and pounds per whatever, but like, screw that. That's success. That's hope for a future.
But do you also need these stories also to create more support from the city government, or do you feel like you had? Yeah.
So
did you receive any support from the city government?
This is another thing that that's why I was like, we'll see, this is gonna be fun. And we said this before. It's the challenging of but as a statement, as a start, this is not just you. This is like, I'm just sharing. The K-word of our existence in philosophical mindset is diunital. It's not dichotomous. But is a dichotomous framework of either or. Diunital says yes and. So when we start with the celebration of the stories and the recognition that the city doesn't even recognize or support certain things, it's because we recognize they can't. Meaning we're not part of the policy of a plan, but we also, see, I've checked myself. And we recognize that you know the right moral and ethical thing is to support education, housing, you know, food systems. You know that the best thing is a better water management. You know these things because every one of your policies says it, and we read every one of your policies. So because we don't reflect what you are saying in terms of a short-term, kind of myopic view of money and capital, but the space is allowed for us to work together. So when our alderwoman comes and says, I love everything you do everything you do, she protects us too. When the city planner who says, damn, I really don't know how to report on your behalf, can you give me a couple of pictures? Can I work it into the document so that you're reflected in the art policy or the cultural plan of Chicago? Sure. Does money and capital flow back to support us? No. Do we have water? Oh. We've not had water or electricity on that site in 10 years. That's a choice. So what?
Now?
No, we got innovation. We should have it. We will. We have solar. We have 100-watt daisy chained. We know how to do butterfly roof. We know how to do water catchment. We also teach. We also talk to folks that are like across different cultures just farm better. They have better water management. That's why they just survive. Like you go to the community gardens that we went to. Yeah, well, that and Amsterdam. We share solutions. Like we've never met, but we're like, oh, I see a reflection of you and me and you. Like, oh, and it's an instant connection of humanity, an instant, like we are sitting there and almost inseparable. We don't have enough time because we're like, we need to be working together because I see where I see what you've done that worked. I see it with us. And how have you tried this? Have you tried that strategy? Have you tried this? That's when we actually had a beautiful moment yesterday. What was it, Hilma? And you could probably enlighten a little bit more about this, but you know, like we had an amazing breakfast by an amazing individual who is overlooked, far too overlooked.
Chef Angie B.
Chef Angie
Check her
B.
out. Yeah.
Please check her out. Please support her. She's also overworked, overloaded, doing too much. She needs a staff. She should get the money to do the staff. Stop doing too much more extra work so you can have more time for your family. So we met her because she had a space that was like, what's the space?
Boerderij Ganzenhoef. Yeah. Pannenkoekenhuis, Boerderij Ganzenhoef.
It's a space that was like master planned and then it didn't work, and so therefore other people got there and it's not reflected appropriately, but she's made it work. She's got a farm, she's got a restaurant, she's got all that stuff, and then we had breakfast there, and then we met other folks at another garden. Where was that?
In Vensterpolder, a neighborhood also in Amsterdam Zuidoost.
Another adaptation, a pivot point. A pivot point is like if I'm walking this way and I see, oh, I'm walking this way now. I'm not going to walk into the path of the problem. I'm walking around the problem. So they were doing gardening as pivot points because there's no grocery stores anywhere. They're relying on the culture of the individuals and the elders that have been doing this for their lives, and in hope that the kids might put the devices down a little bit more, play.
So looking at the Netherlands, we still quite rely on the system, on support from the government.
Sure. I wish I had
even
the
though we see
support
the
you had.
challenges, especially in this type of neighborhoods where you really see a disconnect, that they don't actually really understand the neighborhood or the people that live there.
But that was like this trip this morning. That was a slated development. That was, what was that? That was the garden that we went to this morning. Yeah, I mean that like they have certain resources in certain communities and certain support, and they are very formalized in their support in order to organize with the municipality to say, give us 15 years. Yeah. That's huge. This other group, they're working with you to get there. Yeah. But they share strategies. And I wish we had the type of municipal support that y'all got here. I wish. That's without that support.
And how do you think we should make more use of the fact that we have support over here?
So when we do the heuristic, trial and error and method of development, and try and do it and learn from it, and heuristic, do it, try it again, find a level of redundancy. Oh, well, guess what works? Those pallets and crates that people throw away all the time from all these development projects. Go look at the gardens. Every single garden is using some form of a pallet and a crate in order to make seating, in order to do a garden bed, in order to do, every single one of them is doing the same thing. That's like universal. I can go to Haiti, we go to Jamaica, we go everywhere.
It does mean that you have to be committed to and
So yes, and
for long term to actually work in this way.
So first, recognize the waste stream. Recognize who's overlooked. Recognize the externalities. Oh, what's the cost of development? That doesn't factor into the equation. Well, the climate crisis is a byproduct of externalities. Who has been overlooked? What resources have been thrown away? And so if they're successful like this today in transforming that space, where's Philippe from? Essenberg Park. That was also amazing because they took another space that was very like related, almost like a sister site of rail line site, formal rail line site, discarded, and then transformed it into like a park, like amazing pathway of discovery in tune with nature. The communities have a shared garden. They're doing the work. They're not getting the support. It's the same thing. So when we recognize the same thing that is working over and over and over and over, if it's actually recognized and actually supported, it seems like it should just be supported. And if the architects and the professions and the urban planners say, we're doing our part and we all agree that this is working, and the spaces that they've created are so much more appropriate for the city that's losing all of its. Increasingly, when you just commodify nature, you're actually erasing the spaces of humanity. So if we can agree with that, and we can agree actually that you have codified them in the show as spaces of hope, and if we can then start looking at new forms of metrics and partnerships to start taking the biennial to support each of these other spaces respectively, then we're doing part of our part.
And what is needed to actually make that step together, like to create this...
a commitment.
Yeah.
Why do you do the work you do? You're an architect. Why are you working on a project that would otherwise cost you because they cannot afford to have you as a client? Why do you do what you do?
Because in this particular project, I'm interested in different ways to come to a result.
Okay, so talk about which project. I'm just skipping.
Well, I'm talking about it's talking about the Vensterpolder. It's talking about the Vensterpolder project.
Yeah.
And
maybe just to give a small introduction. I met Rijnboud a couple of years ago. We did an interview for the magazine, and then we started the conversation. Actually, how can we move towards a different paradigm and how we develop the cities? Because if we always start from the current paradigm, how capital is organized, how actually assignments are given also to architects or architectural agencies, then we will continuously have the same result. So we need to start in a different point. And would it be actually possible to not start actually with a challenge that we have within the city? And that challenge was food, not having a supermarket in a specific neighborhood, not having access to healthy food. And then Rijnboud took the challenge. In short.
We sort of, well, you could say we started with the people.
That's the starting point.
Yeah.
Actually having a relationship with the people.
There was this, okay, it was an official investigation from the university who investigated what the people actually needed. And it was done with the people themselves. The people themselves formulating their own questions, giving their own answers, and in the end, let's say some basic needs as a supermarket was not there. To get a possibility of affordable, healthy food, it was not there. So we started with the idea of developing a
Cooperative supermarket,
cooperative
different
supermarket.
So, but what's interesting, what was recognized by universities is that there was no food there, but actually, the response was that there are gardens everywhere. So when you recognize
that was our thing, our sort of investigation, and then we did a little research, and it turned out to be that the urban plan was this way that if every inner garden should be used for agriculture, it could approximately feed the whole block around it.
So then we pushed back.
It was a very nice metric idea of surface and
yeah, that was the starting point. And when we recognized it, we were like, no, I think maybe not production for just pounds in a reductive way. Maybe it's more than just growing the food. And then when we had our meeting yesterday, this is the discourse. So research, partnerships, disruption. Then we said, let's meet people, and we found common allies. They were like, oh, the first thing we did, Naima, what did you were looking at what they were growing. And what did you see?
Where are we talking about? At the community garden?
Yeah, where you were off in the playground where we had our meeting.
Yeah.
What were they growing?
They were growing collards, tomatoes, a bunch of squash. There's a whole part of one of the garden areas that had calendula.
So it was interesting
flowers.
because she was obsessed with the plants, and then the person that was growing it didn't necessarily speak English, but they were having a full conversation. But is this peppers? Is this this? Is this this? What is the name? What do you call it? What do we call it? And that was the beauty of that moment, and it caused us to have the right conversation about, like, maybe the metrics need to change a little bit. Maybe it's not just about this production method that people understand. And then we ended up in a space that was a community center that was directly adjacent. So you had a garden, then you have first, you have lots of people in a housing. Let's start with that. Lots of density of housing. Then you have a garden that has the possibility of feeding, but no way could it feed everybody in that, not just that small space. That garden is much more appropriate for that type of interaction, the human interaction, the people, the play, select people who are dedicated to all time. It's scalable. But then you have the house, this a structure that looks like a house, but it has a kitchen. It has a play space. It has like a shared community space above it. But the problem is that the kitchen is not capacity to feed all of these people. No way. It is the possibility to spark imagination about a public event. So they have dance parties there. They have art parties there. They have all these other. So that space becomes such a regenerative node. But there's no metric of a regenerative node because that is so exponential. However, you can talk about how many events, you can talk about how many people, you can understand over time when a 5-year-old goes there for 5 years, then becomes 10 years, and then 10 years old, and then over time becomes something. That space is transforming. And we talk about the responsibility of the architect is to support, get this kitchen to code.
But you also have to recognize the assets that are in place.
They already recognize the assets.
No, I know they recognize the assets. They live there. They're doing the community building. But just for you, just coming into that space and immediately recognizing the assets.
Yeah, because we listen.
It's also like a perspective and view that you bring in. You have to be able to see the value, to see the assets, to actually work with them.
They already recognized it. It was just people listening. And then when we heard each other and we saw each other differently, we all said, we was like, oh, great. Now we know how to trust each other and actually work together and build this together. Because we were also looking at the building differently, like, what is the ventilation of this building? Why are these windows not why are you not breathing? You get 100 people upstairs, it's hot. What year was this building made? How sustainable? Why is there no lift? You have an elderly population, or if you have wheelchair access, why are there no lift? So
I wanted to ask like the people from the front row.
Questions.
Yeah, if you have any questions also with regards to the visit of the last 2 days.
Yeah, my name is Jan Jongert. I'm from Superuse, an office in Rotterdam for over 25 years, building with communities quite often. What we see here is that indeed they are usually, or not usually, but after some hard work, supported by a local municipality, but as well seen as more something like a placemaking. So that after 10 years, the municipality says, thank you, it's been great to build up this, but we're going to redevelop this site. And
Right.
maybe, I was wondering, did you build in a kind of a strategy for resilience of
Yeah.
your place, that it doesn't become this kind of a food market that you showed in the
Correct.
beginning?
So that was a common thing that we saw here. It was like, we have an agreement with the municipality, or we just did it, there's no agreement yet. That's part of an activation. That's necessary. The reality is the ownership is key. That's the bottom line, and is our responsibilities of architects and planners is to advocate for, just like we should give up that land. That's a challenge that might or might not ever happen in certain designated sites. However, everyone recognizes the right moral, ethical, climate, everything to do. So you have to, every single time it becomes a case of an argument that supports the advocacy of support for those things. So for what we've done in the States is we do look towards private sector. So we've secured when no one else wanted to be there and capital does show up, of course we buy it. And then you can't get rid of us. And there's an agreement that if you go here and you have another adjacent, because we live in the future, so you can see the plays. There's a degree of predictability to municipalities. Do we agree? You kind of know what the permitting, or you kind of know what the regulation, you kind of know what they are. So we also know there's a degree of predictability of development. So we have to read the landscape saying, if we do this, then what are our possible scenarios? So what we look at is typically if-then scenarios, and what are the variabilities of those that might change and alter the factor of the equation. So I say, if we can get this parcel or this contiguous parcel, which we've done, then we know that a developer is looking for this whole chunk. So they're no longer looking at this one chunk. It's a successful strategy. Then we say, well, what does the city say they want to be here? So we present, well, this is doing what you want. So we ask for a negotiated sale. And if we can't get a negotiated sale, then we're asking for long-term leasing arrangements. And so we can get an ownership here and a negotiated sale here and a leasing arrangement here, and then we have a neighbor that is staying. Now all of a sudden you have this contiguous parcel that means that you've bought time. Like, this is a basic strategy. What the group from earlier today was for 15 years. And because they had constructed what they did, it bought them 15 more years.
And how were you able to actually acquire them? How did you organize the finance?
Strategically.
Okay, tell a bit more.
Nope. I don't have to. And I don't trust anybody. That's earned. And just know that it's possible. Most important, when you say, hey, do you have some resources? Yeah, I got some resources. You got $5 on it? What do you have on it? You have a commitment on it? You know what? Don't even pay for the allotment. It's yours, just do it. Then all of a sudden, the collaboration is much more valuable than the simple money. And surprisingly, the money comes. It does show up. Because if you package your argument the right way, with every person that's in this room, this is worth £1 million.
Do you teach it at the university?
Of course.
Okay, good.
Okay. But, so like the strategy is basically, if you can get it, secure it, please. And also, if you don't have it yet, get it. Act on it. Try to do something small that we then, what's the right furniture? What's the right garden bed? What's the right allotment? What's the right structure? That then you do need the architect to come in and say, is this habitable? Is this like legal? A lot of times cities will, if it's really productive, they might look the other way just because they say, look, it's working. Just don't let anybody die here.
It's in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Zico had a question. Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for the presentation, but also about the notion that you try to bring back life into the city, and not like in the way that's explained right now, like we're supposed to live in the city, but you really put life up front and build community through life and not through planning. Do you think, or like I'm figuring this thing out for myself, is this something that you can move or grow towards the city or away from the city?
Unpack it a little further.
Like more in the sense that the city has his structure, has his way of like society is built, and people are like human resource within this structure, and you try to from the images I saw, you try to bring life first, and start to build from that, like the organic way of city growing, of city planning, of community building. Is this a way you can move towards like the structure that's already there, of moving away from it?
So let's take Night Shop. Night Shop, right?
Yeah.
Night Shop?
Yeah.
Night Shop, who's familiar? Anybody? Perfect example. You have a storefront. Was it candy? Something? What was the storefront?
Well,
The night shop, it's called a night shop. Like in the Netherlands, we have night shops.
Oh no,
shops
so
that
the other place that we went to visit. The night shop. It was called the Night Shop. So basically, you have a storefront space that's a space of some kind of interaction in commercial exchange or whatever. But it's not just about the commercial exchange. It's about the interaction. So then when you start to say, I'm not just going to sell produce here, I'm going to have a barbershop. I'm going to have a library right next to the barbershop. I have a bookshelf that I want to give resources to people. Then all of a sudden, you're doing something very, very dynamic in a small but radical way that then says, I'm going to create an interpersonal exchange, and spaces designated to interpersonal exchanges that might create more social capital than they do dollar capital. When you introduce natural capital and say, well, actually, I'm going to teach how to grow in that space, and I say one of the bookshelves, for us, we call it the shelf of life, because we talk about shelf life and how things are tossed away and thrown away. So if we introduce one shelf for just books, one shelf for cereal and everyday essentials that somebody might not have access to in an immigrant population, and then you have one shelf that's designated for just seedlings and growing for a garden or flowers, that is such a dynamic space, and it's right next to a barber who then is talking about life, and then somebody else brings their kid while they're getting the barbershop and they're playing at the shelf of life. You see what I'm saying? And then you have a recreational space in the back. That space at the Night Shop becomes so dynamic, and it transforms a former just other wasted space that becomes a regenerative node that then an elder comes in and counsels. So-and-so says this is a way of life. We've forgotten our way. Then when you have somebody who is in this community, when you have a lot of affordable housing crisis that we have, and we have certain spaces that are designated for, first, affluent, then others, that fill in the space that then don't get the support traditionally from municipality, or you don't fit into the equation of development. So of course, immigrant populations, of course, black populations, of course, these others are outcasted in those spaces. But when you start to take one little small space like that and create that regenerative node that can start to heal and mend and bend the structures of society just enough so that then that plant finds its way to the garden, or that plant finds its way to the corner intersection, and then it goes right around where the kids play. And if you teach the kids how to build a little pallet bench or something in there, and then it goes to the basketball court, all of a sudden it's like mycelia. All of these spaces are now kind of dynamically connected, and it's so unpredictable. Honestly, you can't just say, like, here's a predicted master plan of how this is gonna develop. There's no way you can do that. However, you are making this possibility possible. So you're kind of you're designing with and against at the same time, if that makes sense.
In a way.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk, and we had a very nice moment last Friday in the Essenburg Park. I really felt we were dealing with the same issues.
Energy.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So what I especially when you talk, what really strikes me is that you, when I think of our current progressive policies that fail, it's often very quantitative and kind of defining problems. And I hear you talk in a very different way. It's much more about storytelling, and it's not maybe, it's kind of anchoring change to tradition. So this is something that really inspires me, this idea of history and continuity, and how could we learn not to be problem solvers and always focusing on the future as something that we have to solve or change, but as it is like lived now and through our actions.
Well, the thing that was so nice about our interaction is that we were reflections of each other. Like, you picked up on our energy because it was a shared energy. I mean, I'm not speaking hokey or more metaphysical. Like, I'm excited because what we saw gave us hope for more hope of our possibility of what we're doing. Gia and
Tell us a
Naima.
bit more about this interaction so that we can understand what it's about.
Yeah, I guess we contextualize. You have a space. You could describe your space.
Yeah, so I'm one of the initiators of the Essenburg Park, which is this railway area in Rotterdam that moved from neglected, but it had this history also of gardening and of
like today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of abandoned, and it had threatened because there was this project of development, and then we collaborated with like 3 initiatives to make it into a park, and we were really working a lot on defining what nature is and what what the history of the place is and how we can recognize ourselves in this place. And it's been now a park. We work together with the municipality, actually. And one of our main, I think, selling points towards the municipality and the water board was saying, you don't need so much money to make this place.
It costs less to let us do what we do because nature knows what it's already doing, and our role to cultivate it actually is more affordable, it's more sustainable. Let's just let us try it. See what happens. Municipality says, cool. So I say with and against at the same time. I'm working with you, municipality. I'm working with you, structures and powers. I'm working with you because guess what? The spaces that you don't want, we do. Nature does not want to have a void. So when nature comes in and says, okay, cool, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, then our role, Anthropocene, is to cultivate that space. And if the more you're in tune with that space, the more you do know what butterflies like, and you know what flowers, and you know the time and seasons, then you know nature's telling you you're on the right path. When you carve the pathway that you did, Just like the one that we did today, when you walk through these spaces, there are such an intentionality of the pathway. Yes? Like, don't step on our garden. These are spaces for play. These are spaces where we have a shared water source. These are spaces where we have, these are spaces of intentionality, and the pathway is already carved. And actually, the more we work with the municipality and also against carving out that space and protecting that space, now we're starting to see, and we can't help but vision a different future. And municipalities do agree that, well, while there's not an immediate plan for development, we'll give you this time. So you better act while you can to do as much as you can to either get it built up more or you own it. You figure it out.
Are there any more questions? Because we have to wrap up our conversation. Is there something that you would, like a message or when it comes to future collaborations, what do you see as possibilities?
So we already, I think in the introduction, there is a case study already happening. Thanks to the new institute, thanks to everybody involved in the biennial, the Architecture Month, all of these partners that you see here, we have a firm commitment to doing the case study that supports and advances all of these people that are doing the work on the ground. We're encouraging anybody in here that's inspired by that to support that initiative, whether it's capital, whether it's just political support, whether it's, hey, we endorse that this is the right thing to do. Act on that commitment, because this is a crisis. It's a generational crisis, so that 1 year from now, you come back to us and say, well, did so-and-so ever show up? Did you have a support for the exchange? So 1 year from now, we get to give you a report on these people came, this is what they did, and this is how some of what we've done in Chicago is now in Amsterdam and Rotterdam, and some of that is now in Chicago and New York. Because if there's a 1 year commitment, then there's a pathway to a 5 year commitment. And then the pathway to a 5 year commitment is the pathway to a generational commitment. So that's a challenge.
Long-term commitment. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Any closing words from the organization? No?
I just would like to add that there are drinks and a few bites available outside of the auditorium. Thank you.